Hi everyone, I'm Simone Maria Parazzoli and I'm very excited to discuss with you although virtually, my research on algorithmic accountability in the public sector. I would like to start the discussion with a case study. It's 2020, we are in the UK. During the COVID pandemic, the government decides that GCSE exams and A-levels would not be held in person. And as a viable alternative, the non-ministerial Office of Qualification and Examination Regulation, that is usually called OFQUAL, decided to resort to an algorithm. The conditions in which the algorithm was developed are characterized by a lack of transparency. We know that the algorithm was developed on the basis of school performance in previous years, but we also know that probably it didn't take into account year-to-year variability in the grades of students. And this resulted in disadvantaging lesser good schools. Further, it was impossible to conduct sound accuracy testing, nor benefit from real appeal and redress mechanisms. So what happened is August 13, results are published with an interim report that explains a little bit what has been done to let's say, behind the results, what's the rationale of the algorithm, and some information about it, although insufficient. But the result is that almost 40% of students find that their grades were downgraded compared to the teacher-assessed grade. So what happens, it's only 4 days later, it's August 17, the head of OFQUAL apologizes publicly, and it was decided not to use these grades, the algorithmically predicted grades, instead to use teachers' assessments solely. This is an example of policymakers' enthusiasm for technical solutions, of the difficulty of adopting algorithms that might, as in this case, result in a policy failure, that is, not achieving the goals that the policy was set out to achieve. Indeed, great opposition was found. What do we do with this research? My research aims at addressing 3 questions. The first one is, which is the broad one, how can the public sector adopt algorithms without infringing accountability? And then 2 smaller questions that guide us through the paper. What do algorithms in the public sector do in practice? What is algorithmic accountability in the public sector? And what can governments do to ensure algorithmic accountability? So, starting from, what do algorithms in the public sector do? Algorithms can be defined as a set of rules that precisely define a sequence of operation. This is the definition of Stone in 1971. And specifically decided to refrain from the use of the term AI, which is too broad and probably not enough well defined to understand what we're doing. The research of Levy and co-authors find that algorithms have started being used in public sector since World War II as a result of a zeitgeist of formalization, rationalization, and automation. And the quest for neutrality and non-partisanship is determinant here. In the US context in particular, where the use of algorithms emerged first, a central role has been played by Rand Corporation through their system analysis, for instance. But in the last decade, something has happened, creating the conditions for an unprecedented diffusion of algorithms in the public sector. We have a few factors here. First, the combination of a relatively cheap offer of computing power. Second, great availability of data and the creation of new algorithms that are allowed to extract information from data in novel ways. Yet, we find that great part of the research in the field relies on anecdotal knowledge and a few dozen case studies, and this is the opinion of the Joint Research Center. There have been a couple of attempts to study globally, let's say at the aggregate level, the application of algorithms, and more specifically AI algorithms, in the public sector. The first one probably being the one of the OECD Public Governance Department in 2019. And for instance, this study finds that the 3 main areas of public sector activity that are currently benefiting from AI are healthcare, due to diagnostic capability of algorithms, transportation, for instance, in the case of, let's say, reducing traffic jams, and security to identify threats. Also in public services, for instance, AI is used for chatbots, and obviously the recent developments with LLM, let's say, caused a diffusion of this kind of innovations. Interestingly, we find that in the EU, 30% of AI users are in pilot phase. When it comes to the benefits and risks of these technological solutions, there is a shared agreement among policymakers that the use of algorithms can create public value. But the paradoxical situation is one in which we are adopting algorithms without being backed by evidence and empirical information provided by experts. So what are the benefits? In an attempt to, let's say, bring some order in the field, I identified, let's say, I followed the framework of public value produced by Faulkner and Kaufman, and they developed it for the measurement of public value. And I claim that algorithms can be, let's say, that the benefits of algorithms can be discussed around 4 main dimensions. The first one being efficiency. So we can see how algorithms can improve, let's say, automate repetitive tasks, hence produce a reduction of bureaucratic burden. And the simple case is the automation of subsidies, for instance, or many more trivial tasks that can free time for public servants. Another dimension is service delivery quality. We can see how algorithms produce, let's say, less noisy results. This can mean more accessibility, more fairness from time to time, an immediate analysis of users, hence a better responsiveness to their need. The third dimension is trust and legitimacy. Obviously, the automation results in more transparency if certain specific algorithms are implemented, but many problems specifically related to transparency can be identified. So on this dimension, algorithms, we don't really know yet. And finally, when it comes to outcome achievement, we are completely in the field of not knowns. We don't know about the effects in terms of societal effect, economic effect, environmental or cultural effects on the longer term. Going to the risks now, I claim that 3 main risks can be found, and here again my effort has been to systematize, to bring order, also to simplify the discussions in the field. So the first risk is related to transparency. This means a difficulty for individuals to understand how decisions are being made, and this is against the principle of motivation that must inform every activity of public organizations. Then we see problems related to transparency that come from technical or proprietary black boxes. Technical being when for instance, algorithms of deep learning algorithms are used, which are impossible of whose structure is impossible by design to be explored, interpreted, and explained. But also the case of proprietary black boxes where, let's say, regulatory limitations, let's say, block the possibility for users to access the behind the scenes of algorithmic outputs. The second risk is related to fairness. Algorithms can reflect and amplify the inequalities that exist in society, and this is due to the discriminatory attitudes of designers or the training data. The result is that we see a perpetuation and exacerbation of existing inequalities and discriminations. The third risk, and it's the one on which we focus on in this research, is accountability. Algorithms that are adopted without the governance mechanisms that give citizens the power to raise questions about them, obtain informative answers, and act on them. Lack of mechanisms of this kind that are able to ensure that public actors are answerable, fundamentally answerable for the consequences of algorithms. Here we have been talking about algorithms, but it might be better to refer to the concept of automated decision-making systems. Indeed, this concept has been preferred because it emphasizes the political function of the system rather than its technicalities, and it gives adequate light to the mechanisms of delegation of decision-making from the human decision-maker to the algorithm. One last point here. we are at the early stages of the discussion about algorithms in the public sector. This means that we are in a phase of window of opportunity, and let me explain better. So if we accept that society and technology do affect each other and that they do not run in parallel lines that never intersect, we acknowledge that policymakers are not powerless. Studies of social shaping of technology show that there are choices that affect technology in terms of products that are developed and the general trajectory of innovation. And taking this perspective of social shaping of technology studies, there are two key moments. The first one is a window of opportunity characterized by interpretative flexibility, different designs, uses, coexisting and competing narratives of the benefits and risk. And the second moment is a closure, in which flexibility is lost, and at this point society does not actively discuss on the technology anymore, and changes are increasingly less likely. Given the current the diffusion of algorithms in the public sector, it seems reasonable to suggest that we are currently in the window of opportunity phase. At this point, we're ready to do the second step in the research and discuss what is algorithmic accountability in the public sector. Accountability has been recognized as quintessential for successful human societies since the Code of Hammurabi. It's the law 229 that says, if a builder has built a house for a man and has not made his work sound, and the house which he has built has fallen down and so caused the death of the householder, that builder shall be put to death. So there is this link between action and responsibility. Algorithmic accountability is found in the plethora of principles, as Floridi says. More precisely, Floridi says in 2020 more than 160 principles have been proposed, but they don't really help designing accountable automated decision-making systems in practice. So without studies that deal with this policy-oriented dimension of the implementation of automated decision-making, the risk is what is ethics blue washing, in using Floridi's words. What we're doing here is precisely this attempt to bridge theory and practice. I claim that algorithmic accountability in the public sector can be conceived as the intersection between public accountability and algorithmic accountability. So on public accountability, there is a growing scholarship on public accountability in public administration, yet it's found that this scholarship is fragmented and non-cumulative. But we can see some let's say, big lines here. The first one being, for instance, a distinction between authors who consider accountability a virtue and those who consider accountability as a mechanism. And by conducting an analysis of the variety of, let's say, interpretations of public accountability in various literatures, Bovens could claim that could find a minimal conceptual consensus around the definition. So accountability is first about answering legitimate claims. Second, it is a relational concept. Third, this relationship is between actors that can take different names, such as actor, forum, accountor, accountees, agent, audience. And fourth, and finally, it is related to a consequence. The great variability then in practice revolves around 4 points: who is accountable to whom, for what, by which standards, and why. And here again is Bovens' ideas. What does algorithmic accountability mean in the public sector? So here we take the work of Vieringa, who conducted a systematic analysis of 242 articles published in the decade starting from 2008. And this work showed that there is great variability along the dimensions specified by Bovens, so actor, forum, the relationship, the details of the account, and the consequences. Who is the actor? Who is responsible when the system is not working correctly? And there are many, let's say, possible actors there in many different organizations, many different institutions. It can be that the actor is the policymaker, the developer, the user itself, or the what have been called by Bovens and Zouridis screen-level bureaucrats. Who is the forum? It is citizens, it is the parliament, it is the data protection authority. Here again, new questions emerge considering algorithmic accountability in the public sector in light of the debate on public accountability. What is the relationship between the actor and the forum? A fundamental element of the relationship between the two is the recognition of authority. So as Malgan says, algorithmic accountability without recognition of authority would be just grace and favor reporting or informing. How does the account look like in practice? So the moment in which the relationship takes life, there must be a legal mandate to distinguish between accountability and moral responsibility. In this field, for instance, it would be asked if the external scrutiny should be done before or after the actor carried out the conduct. But this is a field on ex post, ex ante. It's going to be something that we will discuss better later. Finally, what are the consequences after the account? We have limited experience in the field of algorithms to date, but it should be noted that the limitation of power can come from different directions. For instance, it can come, let's say, vertically, horizontally, or diagonally. Here we reach a point and we ask the question that we have been following up to now takes a very tangible dimension. What can governments do to ensure algorithmic accountability? What is in the palette of policymakers? A few studies aim to do so, but they're often non-structured and non-comprehensive, and the Ada Lovelace Institute AI Now study are very important now. Also for my research have been very important. What we do here is start from trying to provide structure to the field, to the activity, let's say, to the automated decision-making system. So a life cycle, an automated decision-making system life cycle. A life cycle is a series of stages through which something, in this case a collective behavior that revolves around a compound of social and technical elements, that is the automated decision-making systems, passes during its lifetime, from its early days to its end. So life cycles can be useful because they bring order, and many of them are still under development. For instance, the ISO standard system life cycles, but they have also been, but life cycles have also been criticized because they might be inaccurate and unable to capture the reality of development processes. Further, and this is particularly relevant for us, they have not been developed to describe the automated decision-making system in the public sector, hence means they're socio-technical and political nature. What I've tried to do now is build an automated decision-making system life cycle, combining the technical life cycles with the more classic, for this audience probably more classic, policy cycle. What's interesting here in particular is what's the meaning of evaluation. When we are in the technical field, evaluation has a different meaning. When we are in the policy field, evaluation also has to do with the relationship between policymakers and the people, and the chain of accountability that goes before from policymakers through the vote to from voters through the vote to policymakers, and then down to public administration, reaching back to users. And this is very relevant because let's say what the evaluation is optimized for in the field of automated decision-making systems is not simply what evaluation is in a more technical field. And this is the key sensitivity that distinguishes this framework, this life cycle, to the technical ones. We take this structure and we analyze what are the solutions on the palette of policymakers. So here is the mapping that I've worked on. The mapping contains 19 policies organized across, according to the stage of the life cycle they act on. 19 policies. Obviously, I'm not gonna go into the details of it, but what's the rationale behind this perspective? Is first of all, again, to bring clarity. this is not comprehensive of all the possible solutions. This takes into account only those that, let's say, have been most discussed in the field up to date. But what does it allow us to do? To have clear perspective of what's going on. If the automated decision making is a complex system in which social, political, technical components are linked and react to each other's behavior, this life cycle approach and this mapping allows us to simplify, to see what are the relationship, the tensions, and let's say to ease the work of policymakers when thinking about what policies to implement. What is emerging in the discussion? I mean, there are many novelties in this mapping. Again, I'm not going to go into the details of them, but how can we, let's say, leverage it? And the idea is it can help us to find a way between algorithmic accountability deficit and overload. Algorithmic accountability policies, here we see 19 of them being represented along the life cycle, can be understood as weights that can be placed at each stage of the life cycle and that restrict the possible behavior of the agents that are active in that stage. They impose indeed limitations on agents' possibility, circumscribing it within certain boundaries established by policy, and as such, agents' behavior is steered and it can be directed so as to optimize public value and minimize harms. How to do this in practice? It's very difficult. Adopting all policies on the mapping would mean drowning agents in an excess of constraints that would make it meaningless to participate in the automated decision-making system, and this is what has been called accountability overload. On the other hand, not adopting any of the policies in the mapping would represent a situation of extreme regulatory laissez-faire, which would be probably dangerous considering the risks of AI systems, algorithmic accountability, automated decision-making systems. The key one is what combination of algorithmic accountability policies is optimal. So, two questions must be asked. What success criteria should be adopted in the evaluation, and what evidence can be used to measure the success of an algorithmic accountability policy or combination of policy against the criteria? With respect to the first one, my suggestion is the answer is inherently political. The politicization of digital issues is emerging now. Parties are not yet, obviously the AI Act has been a starting point, but we're still very far behind comparing it to other themes. But the politicization of these issues is starting now. What are the success criteria? They are inherently political, as every algorithmic accountability policy places burden or benefits onto different actors, and this means that the final criteria cannot but be political. What evidence can be used? And on this, let's say three ways can be identified. The first one being empirical analysis and service of implemented policies. This means case studies, extending the work at the aggregate level. The JRC, for instance, has been doing a lot of precious work on understanding how AI has been implemented in the public sector, but we don't really know how these AIs are, let's say, constrained by algorithmic accountability policies, and how these constraints enable the creation of value or limit, let's say, stifle innovation or the participation, let's say the development of new automated decision-making systems. So this is an effort that should be carried out. The second approach is the accountability cube, developed by Brandsma and Schillerman, and here again it's surveys on the field that would be used to explore, let's say, 3 dimensions that are information, discussion, and consequences. And the third way that you might have seen, it was, let's say, passing through of the concepts I presented here, is an understanding of the complexity of the automated decision-making system through agent-based modeling and simulation. This is clearly an emerging field right now. It's not particularly new, but what's new is the application of these technical solutions to the policy domain, especially when close to policymakers. And I believe this is an potentially very interesting field, potentially very interesting solution to study algorithmic accountability policies in practice. Reaching the conclusion, my conclusion is just 3 very simple points. The first one being algorithms, being more precise, automated decision-making systems are being implemented in the public sector. They present benefits and risks, and balancing them is a matter of policy. Now is the moment to act in the window of opportunity. And indeed, the AI Act, obviously, is an example of the European Commission, the European Parliament, taking the lead and embracing this window of opportunity. Second, algorithmic accountability should be understood in light of the debate on public accountability, which focuses on who is accountable to whom, for what, by which standards, and why. Specifically in this regard, bridging principles and practice should be the ambition. Finally, understanding what can be done in practice is crucial. The mapping of automated decision-making systems, of algorithmic accountability policies based on the automated decision-making system life cycle is a first step in this dimension. Now it's the time to get our hands dirty and understand precisely what these policy solutions on the palette of policymaker can provide. Yes. And that is all from me. Thank you very much. See you in London in July. Ciao!